Welcome to the Halacha podcast Laman Yishmu with Harav Yosef Yeshaya Brown, Mara Da'asra, and a member of the Crown Heights Beis Din. This podcast is brought to you by the Ask the Rav platform in partnership with Laman Yilmedu, the premier institute for practical halacha learning.
Welcome to another installment of the Ask the Rav in partnership with Laman Yishmu podcast. So there was a serious discussion in Eretz Yisrael. This is an old discussion, but it was again revisited. It's becoming more and more people are moving into the city of Tverya, and there's guidelines and policies put forth for how religious Haredi Jews can live there. And one of the issues that came up is what's the correct spelling of the word Tverya. If you look around, traditionally in Shas, in most places, the city is spelled Tes Vez Reish Yud Alef. But in modern Hebrew, it's normally spelled Tes Vez Reish Yud Hey. So which is the correct spelling? How is it supposed to be spelled? So in the Eidah Haredis in Yerushalayim, they had a get-together, they had a session, and that was one of the issues that came up, and it was decided that it's supposed to be spelled with a Hey, although it sounds like the Hey is the more modern Hebrew spelling, and the spelling with the Aleph is more ancient, but they brought their proofs why it should really be spelled with an aleph, with a hey, And I want to examine this point right now. We have a general klal that we have to look at a name and find out where it's from. Now, the city of Tverya, by the way, before I continue, I do want to mention that the Rebbe would pronounce it always Tverya instead of Tverya. I don't know the source. If in original, you don't find in the original Mishnayos and Gemaras which have the Kudus, it's hard to find what's the correct way of vocalizing it. Amongst Yemenite people, anyhow, every segel is pronounced as a patach, so that wouldn't make much of a difference. And specifically, interestingly, there's a Tiberian, the Tverya way of pronunciation, which they actually do distinguish between a segel and a patach. So, and it will use the pronunciation that the Rebbe used and refer to it as Tverya. So, going back to the name Tverya, it's not found in Tanakh, it's not a Hebrew name. The first time we have this name mentioned is in Mishnayos, and in Mishnayos, it's with an aleph. It's hard to know if it's really with an aleph, because we have to go through many different manuscripts, and often these things have changed from one manuscript to another. But normally, assuming it's an Aramaic name, normally Aramaic names finish with an aleph, and many times in Shas it finishes with an aleph. If you look at the source of the name, so in Medrash it's brought that Alexandria is named after the king Alexandrus, and Tverya is named after the king Tiberius. And that's how the Medrash explains the pasuk, Karu v'shmoisam alei adames. They gave lands names after people. So it's a Goyish source, a non-Jewish name, it's not a Hebrew name. And there was, if you look at the history, there was a war happening at the time, and during the war with the Jewish people, that's when this name was given. So assuming that's the case, it really should be written with an aleph. We have a Gemara that the Gemara says, Lama Nikr Shema Tverya. Why is the city called Tverya? Shatoiveri Yasa, because there's good vision over there. You can see well over there. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Sheisheves betabur shel Eretz Yisrael. It's at the belly of Eretz Yisrael. It's in the center of Eretz Yisrael. Now, it's actually geographically, it's not in the center. And there's another discussion about that. Why it actually says it's in the belly. Does the belly mean the center? Does it mean higher up? There's a Sefer Kafter V'Ferech from one of the Rishonim that talks about the borders of Eretz Yisrael. And he gives his explanation why it says it's in the tabur of Eretz Yisrael. Interesting, the Sanhedrin, the last place the Sanhedrin were exiled was in Tverya, and that's where they'll come back before Mashiach comes. They'll go to Tverya, and from there go to Eretz Yisrael. And the Sanhedrin are considered the center, and actually the same phrase is used, the tabur, the belly, as Tverya. But be that as it may, the Gemara gives the explanation why it's called Tverya. And Mefarshim actually asked this question, how could the Gemara say that the reason it's called Tverya is because Toveri Yasa, because of its good vision, or Tverya because it's called that way because Yesheves betabur shel Eretz Yisrael, it's because it's in the center, in the belly, the stomach of Eretz Yisrael, when the real reason is because of the name of the non-Jewish king. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden talks about it, other people talk about it. Obviously, Chazal wanted to give it a Jewish meaning and a Jewish content. That became eventually the Jewish name. So they wanted to give it a Jewish meaning, and that's the Jewish meaning. The Rebbe once had a discussion with the Rabbanim Harashim, with the chief rabbis of Eretz Yisrael, and the Rebbe pointed out the strange thing that the word Sanhedrin, the name of the Masechta, talking about the Sanhedrin, they actually are going to return to Tverya first. Sanhedrin is a non-Jewish word. In Torah we use the word shoftim, dayanim, not Sanhedrin. So Rav Eliyahu, the chief rabbi, told the Rebbe that we find in Mefarshim, the Bar Tanura brings, Sanhedrin is Rosh Tevis, Soina Hadr Panim, there's a particular Rosh Tevis in Hebrew, but that's not the Pashta Pshat. That is, Pashta Pshat, Sanhedrin is a council in Greek and not in the Jewish language. So Rabbi Eliyahu mentioned to the Rebbe that Tverya is also named after a non-Jewish source, and Chazal interpret the Lashon HaKodesh, to which the Rebbe answered that when you're talking about a city, that's not a chiddush that you use a non-Jewish name for a city. Alexander Mogdin asked that all the Kehanim should be named after him. Alexander became a Jewish name, but Sanhedrin is a name of Torah. It's not a name of a city. It's a name of a Masechta. And the Gemara, the Rambam, all going to use the terms Sanhedrin rather than using the term shoftim or dayanim, right? And it's a sefer which is written, the Sechta is written for Rabbanim. So that's an interesting point. And the Rebbe spoke there about the idea of refining non-Jewish languages, which this is all a different discussion altogether. So going back to the Gemara gives those different reasons why it's called that way. So there is a tshuva of the Beis Yosef. And he actually addresses what to write in a get, where it makes a big difference. You have to write which rivers it's near. But he also talks about to write it with an alef or with a hey. Now we have a general rule, which the Beis Yosef is not so agreeing with this rule, but that's generally the rule. And he brings on a Shulchan Aruch that a Hebrew name finishes with a hey, like Chana, Sarah, and a name which is in another language finishes usually with an alef. So the one who wrote the question to the Beis Yosef, this is found in a sefer called Tshuvas Beis Yosef. There's another Charles Tshuvas response of the Beis Yosef called Afkas Reichel. But this is another different sefer called Tshuvas Beis Yosef, Hilchis Gittin Siman Aleph. And over there, the one writing to him asks that since Chazal say it means tovah riyas, a good vision, so it's probably tov, tezvez, and reish yud aleph, as in the word re'iyah. Well, it just moves around the letters. That's what he suggests. But the Beis Yosef writes back, no, it's a Hebrew word, it should be written with a hey, and reish yud hey is also like the word re'iyah, just missing the aleph. So instead of being reish yud aleph, like the word re'iyah, seeing reish aleph yud, right? It's reish yud hey and it's missing the aleph. So it's clear in the Beis Yosef that he actually suggests that it should be written with a hey. And this is brought down lahalacha and the Be'er Hetiv, and many other poskim mention this in Hilchas Gittin. There are those that suggest it should be with an aleph, but that is not the accepted position. Since the Jewish people gave it themselves the same name, and it became a Jewish name with a Jewish meaning, that is indeed the minig today in Gittin, and therefore that should also be the minig in kesubah. We normally do a kesubah the same way we do a get. The minig is that we do it with a hey. And we have a general rule that even a name that's supposed to be with an aleph, if the person normally signs a name with a hey, we could write with a hey. Today's day and age, it's acceptable that people write the name Tverya with a hey. And even if both ideas would be equal, if a person writes a hey instead of an aleph, it's kosher. If a person writes an aleph instead of a hey, it's not kosher. So therefore the accepted minig became to write Tverya with a hey, which is indeed what they ruled in Eretz Yisrael today in their discussion. I'm just going to mention, as we're talking about this, that in the Yerushalmi, it's actually spelled differently, Tverya Tes Yud Vez, instead of Tes Vez, as in the name Tiberius, the name of the king. There's also discussion in some places that maybe there's two different cities with the name Tverya, based on various different Gemaras. The Shlomo HaMelech wants to say so. Just a beautiful vert that the Ben Ish Chai says that since the Geula comes from Tverya, that's where the Sanhedrin will come back. So he says the explanation is that Tverya is where Reb Meir Balanes is located in Tverya. He says Reb Meir is the one that holds that the Yidden are always considered Hashem's children, whether they listen to what he says or they don't listen. Bein kachu, bein kach kruyim banim, whether they're oisen v'tzein shel makom or not oisen v'tzein shel makom, they're always considered Hashem's children. So therefore, Yidden are always, he says, always maleim mitzvahs keriman. The Gemara says that the Tverya is also called rekes. Rekes means empty, that even the people that are empty in Tverya, the reikanim, are always full of mitzvahs. He says, why are they full of mitzvahs? Because even when they do the wrong thing, the Eibusher still loves them, and that doesn't extinguish their mitzvahs. Their mitzvahs are forgiven. That's the svara that he says. Other people say because the Sanhedrin was in Tverya, and therefore the Sanhedrin had such an influence on the Eden. A different pshat is the Rabbi Akiv Yosef Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov says, tovah riyas has a good vision. Vision means that you see what's going to happen. If a person sees the future, then he doesn't want to do Avedis, he wants to do mitzvahs all the time. Therefore, Tverya is a place that is full of mitzvahs. And just to finish off on this point, that the Rebbe spoke about the idea of tovah riyasa, the beautiful vision of Tverya, that in Avedis Hashem means looking at a person with a positive eye. And if you look at another person with a positive eye, he looks at you with a positive eye. And that's clearly connected to the din of Gula, which is Avos Yisrael. Once there's Avos Yisrael, the Gullus came about because of the opposite of Avos Yisrael. So Tverya is where the Gula will start from, because it's connected with having a positive eye. And that's all connected with the theme of Tverya. It's time to move on to another topic.
A brief ad, and we'll be right back to the podcast. Already have smicha? Now it's time to fulfill the Rebbe's hurrah to receive Yadin Yadin certification. Join the Dayanis program with the renowned Maggid Shir Rabbi Tuvia Kasimov and gain the knowledge and training to rule on real-life questions. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Sign up today at lemanyilmedu.com.
Now, talking about Tverya, which is the name of a city which has a beautiful history, brings me to another city, Lahavdil, outside of Eretz Yisrael, to another country, to Italy. So we have a particular association with Italy, because in Chabad we have a tradition that Alter Rebbe said that when Moshe Rabbeinu told Moshe, when Hashem told Moshe, L'kachtem lachem, the mitzvah of having an esrog, there was shluchim that was sent on one of the clouds, on a cloud that was sent to bring esrogim from Calabria to have a Calabrian Italian esrog. The Alter Rebbe, we have a tradition that the Alter Rebbe said dafka to use a Calabria esrog from Italy, mitam hayadu aloi. That's the expression used in the Sichos and the Sefer HaManagim. Tam hayadu, the Alter Rebbe had a reason that is known to him. What's special about this esrog besides for Tam hayadu? We have a Mesoidus. Some Sefer says that the tradition from generations is that esrogim come from Italy, and when it comes to chickens, birds, how do you know which birds are kosher? We don't only follow the simanim, we follow the Mesoida, we follow the tradition. How do you know if this is really an esrog? Something could look like an esrog, smell like an esrog, but not be an esrog. How do you know it's the actual same mean that Rebbe told Moshe Rabbeinu? So we have to follow our Mesoida, and our Mesoida is the Calabrian esrogim. The Rebbe adds another point, which was not mentioned in earlier generations, that Chazal tell us that when Yitzchak gave a bracha to Esav, and he told him, Mishmanei ha'aretz yeh meshavecha, that you will receive from the fats of the land, Rashi and Chumash brings, the Medrash says that he gave him a bracha that he will own Italia Shal Yavin. Italy belongs to Esav. So Italy is referred to as Mishmanei ha'aretz, the fats of the land. Says the Rebbe, if Italy is the fats of the land, when we do a mitzvah, we want to do the most improved, positive way of doing a mitzvah. Kol chelev l'Hashem. A mitzvah is supposed to be done from giving the best. So the best place to get an esrog is from Mishmanei ha'aretz. Where's that? Italy. So there's a nigel explanation why dafka to use an esrog from Italy. Then there's a rumor in the name of the Rebbe Rashab that dafka because in Italy they were not allowed to do, in Calabria they were not, Yidden were not living there, and dafka to elevate the lowest sparks, so vikashta misham es Hashem alakecha, klippa is called sham, elokus, godliness is called zeh. We want to take the esrog, dafka bring from such a place as Calabria. So these are various different explanations why dafka Calabria esrog. The problem, however, and a number of people have asked this question, and sometimes Chabad Hasidim are attacked for this, besides all the other arguments that they have questions on the esrogim, but I'm talking about the principle right now. How could it be that the Eibusha told Moshe, a tradition from the Alter Rebbe, that Eibusha told Moshe to get the esrogim from Italy, when there was no such thing as Italy altogether? Because the Gemara says in the Sechta Shabbos, that when Shlomo HaMelech married an unfortunate daughter of Pharaoh, the Malach Gabriel put a stick in the ocean, and on this stick grew the whole... From that was built the whole entire Italia Shal Yavan, the whole entire Italy. So there was no Italy until Shlomo HaMelech married the daughter of Pharaoh, not in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So how can we say that Moshe Rabbeinu was told to get esrogim from Italy? It's very, very interesting because we bring this tradition. The Rebbe simultaneously, when he talks about the tradition of giving an Italian esrog going back to the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe brings the word of Mishmanei ha'aretz is Italia Shal Yavan. And why is Mishmanei ha'aretz Italia Shal Yavan? So the Rebbe wrote about this both in the Rishimis and in Igres. The Rebbe later wrote that he found this earlier name of the Rebbe Heschel. Why does Rashi say that the fats of the land is Italy? Maybe it's something else. How do you know this in Pashup Pshat in Chumash that it means Italy? So the Rebbe's Pshat was that it says already in earlier Svarim that the Rebbe says he found it later in earlier Svarim that Yitzchak gave already a bracha to Yaakov. Once he gave a bracha to Yaakov that he will have everything. So now Esav came and he said, there's no brachas left for me. So Yitzchak told him, you'll have the fats of the land. What do you mean you'll have the fats of the land? It was already all given to Yaakov. There's nothing left. Says Rashi, it's Italy. Italy wasn't around yet. Italy will only come about later. So Yaakov only received whatever's around now, that he will have ownership of that. You'll receive Italy. So that brings that piddush when he's talking about taking esrogim from Italy, mentioning clearly the idea that Italy was not around then, and simultaneously with being told this is a Messiah tradition from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. These things seem to contradict each other. So, this is a serious question. By the way, there's another question, just about a Gashmias thing, that Gemara says in Masechtas Megillah, talking about Italy Shal Yavan, that on one side is ocean, on one side is mountains, on one side is there's Mechitza Shal Barzel. We know nowadays, Italy is surrounded by water from all three sides that actually doesn't even fit in with the Metziz of Italy that we know, which is another question that's addressed in other places. But I want to go back to the point how the people that ask the question on Chabad Hasidim really should know this is not a question on Chabad Hasidim, it's a question on the Gemara itself. Because we have many sources that there was Italy already in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, starting from the Mishnah, the beginning of Kedushin, that says that for Kedushin, the machlokas what kind of coin to use, and one of the coins is a isar ha'italki, which if you look in Tosas and the Arich and all of the Mefarshim, it says this is a coin from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu that we're supposed to use according to Beishamai for Kedushin. We have Mishnayos and Masechtas Shviyos that talks about a money italki, and look in the Pirush Rash, one of the Rishonim talks about how this is from the time of Moshe. We have measurements that we use, the Mishnah says italki, also from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah tells that a ben Soyer Moira is chayiv misa if he drinks wine. What kind of wine did Abraham tell Moshe he has to drink? Yain ha'italki, the Gemara tells us. But the strongest question is from a Gemara Masechtas Chulin. The Gemara talks about an Ezov, and it discusses an Ezov that has a nickname, a Shem Levai, an Ezov Roimi, a Roman type of Ezov. Clearly, the Gemara mentions that it has to be a name from the time of Matan Torah. So already in the time of Matan Torah, there was an Ezev called, if you look in the Sugya there, an Ezev called Ezev Roimi. So these are all strong indications there was a Rome, there was an Italy. Rashi Parshas Vayishlach, it already mentions Aluf Magdil, one of the Alufei Esav, which then he says Aluf Magdil refers to Roimi. Many other sources imply that the Romans, the Italians was around earlier. We have in, say, the Adoiris and other sources that Rambam brings this. It says that there was the son of Eliphaz, which is the son of Esav Tzvoi. He built Italy. So there was an Italy already then. Now, I'm not going to go to the whole discussion. Some people want to say there's two Romes, there's one Rome. So there are a number of answers. Number one, it could be the whole Gemara is not a literal Gemara. There was a stick, it's a ruchnis thing, there was a stick in the ocean which built Italy. Means as a result of Shlomo HaMelech marrying the daughter of Pharaoh, we have the klippa of Roimi, we have the inn of Golus. That, and some of Farshim actually say the beferish on that Gemara that it doesn't mean in the literal sense, which that, of course, there's no question if you take that approach. Often we have the idea of midrashas chalukas. There's one medrash, there's another medrash that says differently. Another pshat is there wasn't Italy, but it wasn't yet established, it wasn't yet a settlement. It later became a settlement. The Rebbe, in his letter, when he talks about Mishmane Haaretz, writes that the whole area was swept away through an ocean based on the Yerushalmi. So if that's the case, then there was a land, and the land was swept away, and there's a new land that was built again, so it really doesn't create a problem. Bichlal, Pashup Pshat is, we don't know that the whole entire Italy was created then. It was expanded and it created the city of Rome. But we don't know that the entire Rome was developed just then. Now this could have bearing on other halachas too. If you see tall mountains, you're supposed to make a bracha as if it was there from the beginning of creation. If Italy wasn't there in the beginning of creation, then you wouldn't make that bracha. Another discussion is, there was a mechaber called the Eretz Tshuva, and Enikal with the Chassam Sofer. His son was a Rav in Italy, and he discussed with him if he should read the Megillah in Italy, in a city which is walled, has a walled city, should you read it on the 14th of Adar or the 15th of Adar? And he brings, because this is from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, he doesn't even mention the Gemara that Gabriel was the one who put a stick in the ocean and made Italy. And he brings the Rashi that we mentioned earlier, Aluf Magdil, Aluf Roimi, implying Rome was already around then, and if it's a walled city from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, then you should read the Megillah on the 15th. So, here, just to mention that all those people that are asking the question should know all these things were already addressed earlier. Obviously, when the Alter Rebbe said they went to Calabria, And how to reconcile, there's a number of different ways how to reconcile this.
A brief ad, and we'll be right back to the podcast. Want to learn halacha in an organized, in-depth way? Machon Leman Yilmedu presents a wide range of halacha courses with top Magidei Shir, excellent course materials, and the option to join via Zoom from anywhere in the world. Spots fill up fast, so find the course that's right for you at lemanyilmedu.com.
Let's move on to another topic altogether. I got a question this week from a Rav in Eretz Yisrael about a lady that was sitting Shiva, and comes Shabbos, and she wants to put on makeup. And someone who's mourning is not allowed to put on makeup, but she puts on makeup every single Shabbos. Now, is she allowed to on this Shabbos also? What about Avelus B'Farhesia, mourning publicly? Now, normally an Avel is not supposed to go out of the house, so why do they need makeup? But on Shabbos, it's okay to go out of the house. Specifically because Avelus B'Farhesia shouldn't like you mourning publicly. If a person has a simcha, they're allowed to go out of the house if it's obvious that they're not going because of Avelus. So, and even if she wouldn't be going out of the house, a semi allowed to wear shoes on Shabbos because it's considered public mourning. Even if a man or a lady are staying home, they're allowed to, when they're alone, they're allowed to wear shoes. Arguably, they should be able to wear makeup as well. Now we can make a distinction. There's different types of makeup. There's makeup that's to cover up on something, or makeup which was actually to beautify. That might be a distinction generally about makeup even during the week. So, as a general rule, Avelus B'Farhesia, mourning publicly, means even things that you're not going to do something and it'll be obvious that you're not doing it. It's not only when you do an act of mourning, when you don't do something, when you don't give shalom to people, when you don't go to shul, and it's obvious that the reason you didn't go to shul is because of Avelus. When a person on Shabbos, which falls out on Tisha B'Av on the 9 days, a person does not eat meat, that's mourning public, all those things you're not allowed to do. So if she's not going to wear her makeup, it'll be very obvious that she's mourning. Even though there are other indications that she's not mourning because she's wearing shoes, we paskin that that's not good enough. If there's another way that indicates that she's mourning, she always puts on makeup. So there's a whole discussion about this. I don't want to go into the lengthy arichas about this. There was some place that they had the meaning that the oval would change their place in shul on Shabbos. Other places did not have this meaning. Machlokes Chabad and Rama. Is that called mourning publicly when you're not sitting in your normal place? Or people will say, okay, his place was taken. Or no. Sometimes people change places. Here, it's not only sometimes people change places and therefore it's not mourning. She always puts on makeup. This time she's not putting on makeup. We wear big day Shabbos. We're concerned. Otherwise it's considered mourning. So this is a very, very difficult question. And the problem here also is because the makeup must be put on before Shabbos. So b'chalal, when people finish their shiva, when it's on a Friday, it's not so simple when they're allowed to finish their shiva, because their mourning goes straight until Shabbos, or they're allowed to start a bit earlier and start getting ready for Shabbos and putting on their shoes. So a lot of people are lenient already from lichbenchen time. Some people are lenient a bit earlier. Are we going to allow them to put in makeup already then just because you can't put it on Shabbos? I find it hard to accept that you should be allowed to put on the makeup. And the reason I find it hard to accept, because someone can argue that they're overgrown with hair. They want to do in the middle of the Shiva, cut their hair because it looks like a mourning on Shabbos. Their nails are overgrown. They want to cut their nails in the middle of Shiva because it looks like they're mourning on Shabbos. Someone that shaves their beard, and people who shave their beard, we're not going to talk about the issue of shaving the beard. That's an independent discussion. But if they don't shave their beard, you could see they didn't shave it. Pasha doesn't look nice. So they're allowed to shave their beard in the middle of Shiva. Nobody would say you're allowed to do that. Obviously, there's some major distinction between certain aspects of Avelis and other aspects. Where shoes is okay, going and putting on makeup, I find it hard to accept that would be okay. We have even the poskim that allowed different things on Shabbos because of Avelis B'Farhesia put certain limitations. Makeup, after all, is not something which is a necessity. I mean, for some people it is, but generally it's not a necessity. It's not like shoes where it's very, very obvious. Some people wear makeup, some people don't wear makeup, some people wear makeup every day, some people don't wear every day. Some people, even if they wear every day, but some days they don't wear their makeup. So I find it hard to accept that would be permissible, and that was the psak that the person receives. Going on to another topic altogether, this is becoming relevant to a lot of people. There are people that can only hear through a cochlear implant. And the question is, if that's considered hearing for Shofar, the Shoshana, the Megillah, for Kiddush, Havdalah, all kind of other things. So something called hearing aids. Hearing aids, halachically, according to most places, is not considered hearing. It's considered a brand new sound. It's something else. Like the Rebbe explains that all those that paskin mitigate to telephones and which the same idea as hearing aids, that it could be Yoitze, Kiddush, Havdalah. They did not understand how a phone works. It's actually converting the original sound to a new sound. You're not hearing the person's voice. So, if it's a new artificial sound, then you can't be Yoitze through that. Now the question is something totally different. Today people have what we call cochlear implants, and there's an argument that maybe it should be even better than hearing aids. A hearing aid makes a new sound coming out of a speaker. What this implant does, it actually skips all of that and stimulates the person hearing her directly straight into the brain that they can hear more natural. The problem is that this is actually backwards. Because the problem with the hearing aid is not that it made a second sound, is because you didn't hear the original sound. With a hearing aid, at least you're hearing some sound, but now you're hearing a new sound. With this implant, there's no sound whatsoever. The microphone is taking sound waves and putting it straight, converting into electrical signals, which go to the person's nerve. So actually, a cochlear implant is actually a much bigger problem. Now, glasses, it could be considered seeing. Now, we all understand that, right? Because there's an obstacle, the light doesn't come to your eye, and the glasses lets it come to your eye. But over here, what we're doing is we're replacing the whole natural process of hearing through an artificial method of hearing. It's like a person would have a camera which be connected wire to the person's nerves, so they should be able to see through a camera. Their nerves will see and not their eyes. So that would mean you wouldn't be able to make a bracha on seeing the moon. That wouldn't be considered seeing. A person can have a pacemaker that helps their heart. But no one's going to say that the pacemaker makes the electricity turn into blood. An implant doesn't make an electric signal to be considered real sound. Halacha is not concerned with microscopic biology. Halacha works off plain natural experience process of sound. And the hearing aid does not count halachic hearing, and certainly cochlear implants also it's not a regular case of hearing. It's became a big topic amongst contemporary poskim, but there are many poskim that say this, and certainly according to the position that's accepted, that hearing aids are not acceptable and cochlear implants wouldn't be accepted either. Let's move on. We have a tiny bit more time left to one or two other topics, depending on how much time we have over here. Someone asked me the following question. Their father has a name, and he has a nickname. The nickname is not a very common, well-known nickname. Now they're in camp, and there's someone else that has the exact same nickname, which is very unusual. We have a halacha brought down in Shulchan Aruch that somebody has a shem ploi, a shem peli, a wondrous, unusual name, that other people don't normally use this name. So you're now allowed to call other people using your father's name. So now he's in camp, he wants to know, can he use... Seemingly, he shouldn't be able to call this other person in camp using their nickname, which is his father's nickname, because it's a very unusual name. Pashtas HaShulchan Aruch implies that you shouldn't call other people even if it's not in the presence of your father. Other Mefarshim learn Pshat, no. In the presence of your father, when you're talking to another person and it's the same name as your father and it's an unusual name, then it's a problem. So we have this machlokes, which one does the Shulchan Aruch refer to? So in addition to the fact that we have this machlokes, we also have the Bach that says the whole thing is not even a regular Isser. It's a form of kavod. The Rambam says Yi Zohir, doesn't say you're not allowed to. It's a menschliche thing, kavod thing, respectful thing. Don't call other people with the name of your father if it's an unusual name. So now we have, first of all, it's a machlokes if it applies, if it's not in the presence of the father. Second of all, it could even be it's not in Isser altogether. The Drisha says it's only the presence of the person's father, and this position of the Drisha is brought in many poskim. We're not talking about something which is a Isser D'Oraisa, because although it is a mitzvah of Kibbud Avayim, but this is not something which is mamish, not giving cover to father and mother. It just looks like the person is degrading the cover of the father and mother. So since it's a D'Rabbanan, and it's a svek, there's a number of doubts. This whole idea is not even brought in the Gemara. So there are poskim that say that according to other shittas it's not an issue to begin with. Even according to the Rambam does bring this, some people say it's not a problem if it's not in front of him. And even in front of him, it could be it's only just an extra covet kind of thing. Especially when it's noticeable that you're talking about someone else, you're not talking about your father, that gives much more reason to be lenient. The Rambam's lashon is that it's a name that everybody who hears this name knows you're talking about him. So that question leads us to a question, so what kind of name are we talking about? Are we talking about a name which is just not a common name, or it has to be a very, very rare name? So there's another element of leniency when we're not talking about something which is extremely rare, because if it's extremely rare, it makes it much more serious. On top of all of that, we have a kula that's brought down in quite a few achreinim that probably the father is meichel. So if the father is meichel, it wouldn't be a problem to begin with. So yeah, it's a good idea to be stringent, but there's certainly room for leniency in this case as well. Okay, Besudas Teves.
Join the global halacha learning revolution of the Laman Yilmadu Institute and bring increased brachos into your home. For details about the various learning programs, visit our website, lamanyilmadu.com. That's LEMAANYILMEDU.com.